I should introduce myself before the rest of this disaster unfolds. My name is Commander Vrektanner, former senior drill instructor of the Galactic Military Academy on Kepler 7. For more than 22 cycles, I shaped soft, unprepared recruits into functioning soldiers. And I was good, too good, apparently. The Academy plastered my face on recruitment holos. My evaluations were spotless, and my superiors spoke my name with something close to admiration. I maintained a 93% success rate with trainees who sometimes fainted just walking from their bunks to the meal hall. That alone should have earned me a statue. Kepler 7 itself was a marvel. 17 training decks, gravity-adjustable arenas, atmospheric simulators for every known breathable environment, and so much classified technology that smugglers dreamed of raiding the place. Recruits came from every corner of the galaxy. Bellan warriors with armor for skin, Krite engineers with brains like quantum processors, Solon strategists, and even pibbling small, jittery creatures who jump at their own shadows but somehow survive military training. My teaching style was unorthodox. I prefer what I called motivational surprises, a fake hull breach alarm, a controlled gravity glitch, or replacing someone's bland ration with Krite hyperspice to wake them up. Nothing harmful, just enough to keep cadets alert. The instructors found my methods hilarious. Some cadets feared me, others respected me. Either emotion worked fine for training. Then came the humans. When the Galactic Council approved the human exchange program, I thought it was another bureaucratic mistake. Like the time they tried standardizing time zones across species with different planetary rotations. Humans from the infamous Death World, where storms could tear metal apart and predators stalked the forests, or so the biologists claimed. The way people talked about them, you'd think humans breathed plasma and ate antimatter crystals for snacks. So when I learned one of these legendary Death World youths had been assigned to my training unit, I nearly rolled my eyes out of my skull. I expected some hulking brute dripping with barely contained savagery. That is not what arrived. She walked into the assembly hall on a Tuesday, inspection day, my sacred ritual of finding every tiny imperfection in a cadet's uniform. And there she stood, Cadet Elena Torres, the supposedly fearsome human. Small, soft-looking, compact even by human standards. Hair tied back in what humans call a ponytail. Brown eyes too large for her face. Uniform slightly oversized like a child playing dress-up. I checked my datapad 3 times to ensure she wasn't misfiled. The other cadets stared at her like she was a myth come to life. Bellans kept their distance despite being twice her size. Pibblings whispered nervously, making my auditory canals ache. Even the normally unflappable Solvon recruit, Jorv, kept glancing at her like she might erupt. Torres, however, simply observed the room, calm, silent, eyes tracking exits and faces with stillness that felt oddly intentional. No fear, no arrogance, just precise awareness. When I called her name across the hall, she moved instantly to attention. Her posture was correct, crisp even. Someone had drilled discipline into her early, but she still looked like the wind might blow her over. I greeted her with enough sarcasm to peel paint. Welcome to the Galactic Military Academy. I trust the journey from your tiny death world wasn't too exhausting. No, Commander, she replied evenly, not a flicker of emotion. That should have been my first warning. But I dismissed her and continued the inspection, already plotting how to test a human. Not to harm her, just to see what she was made of. Humans were rumored to be adaptable, resilient, nearly impossible to provoke to panic. I want to confirm whether the legends match reality. They didn't. They underestimated her. And so did I, because 3 weeks later, with one decision, one moment of arrogance, I managed to trigger the chain of events that eventually destroyed my entire career. And it all began with a single, very stupid motivational prank. 3 weeks into training, I hit my limit with Cadet Torres' perfect record. No mistakes in her uniform, no errors in drills, no hesitation during commands. It was infuriating. Recruits were supposed to provide at least something for an instructor to correct. A wrinkle, a loose strap, a misplaced badge, anything. But she simply performed everything with robotic precision. Tuesday arrived again, My favorite day, the day cadets dreaded most. Uniform inspection. Under the harsh white lights of Deck 4, every flaw became visible. I walked slowly down the rows, savoring the tension. A loose boot strap here, a crooked insignia there. These small failures fueled me. Then I reached her. Elena Torres stood in perfect stillness, shoulders back, chin lifted, eyes fixed forward. Her uniform was flawless, not a thread out of place, not a single scuff. Her boots gleamed so brightly I could see the ceiling reflected in them. It irritated me more than I cared to admit. I circled her the way predators circle prey, though I didn't realize how that would look on security footage later. To me, she was simply another cadet to test. Cadet Torres, I said, letting the silence stretch. Your uniform meets minimum expectations. Thank you, Commander, she replied in the same calm voice she always used. No shaking, no nervous swallow, no fear, just stability, boring stability. So I did something stupid. I drew my ceremonial blade, a villain tradition, more symbol than weapon. The polished metal glinted under the lights. The cadets around her stiffened, but no one dared look directly at me. That level of fear? I took pride in it back then. However, I continued, raising the blade. I believe the seam requires closer inspection. Without warning, I cut cleanly through the fabric on her left shoulder. The sleeve tore away with a soft, ripping sound, falling limp against her arm. Perfectly executed, clean, controlled. The room froze solid. 17 cadets inhaled sharply. One pibbling squeaked. Someone in the back whispered a curse. Even the lights seemed to hum louder from the tension. Torres didn't move. She didn't even glance at the ruined uniform. Not a flinch, not a raised brow. Nothing. She remained exactly as she had stood before the blade touched her sleeve. No defect. I announced casually, sliding the blade back into its sheath. My mistake. I fully expected anger, embarrassment, a crack in her composure. Something human. But she simply said, "No problem, Commander." Her voice didn't shake. At the time, I took this as obedience, proof that she was finally affected by my tactics. I even smirked as I walked away, hearing faint, nervous laughter from the others. But what I failed to notice, what I should have noticed, was a very slight tightening of her jaw. The way her eyes tracked me with sharp, silent calculation. The subtle flex of her fingers before she returned them to attention. These tiny details should have set off alarms. Instead, I left that inspection pleased with myself, convinced I'd finally cracked a mysterious human. Later that day, I even joked about it in the instructor's lounge. The other officers laughed. One asked if humans bleed molten lava. We were idiots. 48 hours later, while sipping my bitterroot tea, a notification appeared on my datapad. Official complaint filed. Cadet Elena Torres. The charges listed were numerous. Destruction of Academy-issued uniform. Abuse of authority. Endangerment during inspection. Misuse of ceremonial weapon. Creation of hostile training environment. And one phrase that made me choke on my tea. Assault with a bladed weapon. I laughed at first. Actually laughed. I forwarded the complaint to another instructor with a message. Looks like the Death Worlder has feelings after all. I wish someone had slapped me, because that single complaint marked the beginning of a long, devastating descent, one that would dismantle my career piece by piece. All because I underestimated a quiet human cadet. I assumed the complaint would die in the usual bureaucratic swamp. Filed, reviewed, dismissed. Cadets sometimes panicked and submitted paperwork they later withdrew. It was practically a tradition. I'd even coached a few over the years on how to reflect on their emotional responses until they realized their complaint was unnecessary. But this one was different. 6 hours after Torres filed her grievance, I received a second notification. This one carried the superintendent's seal. A formal investigation has been initiated. That meant interviews, evidence collection, regulatory analysis, the whole machinery of military oversight grinding into motion. For a cut sleeve, a joke. At first, I brushed it off. Superintendent Correll was tough, but she respected strong instructors. I'd worked under her for cycles. I believed, stupidly, that she'd laugh and close the case. I was catastrophically wrong. For days after the complaint, she summoned me. Not invited, summoned. When I entered her massive stone-carved office, she didn't look up from her hollow display as she spoke. "Sit." I obeyed. She kept reading for an uncomfortably long time. Each second felt like another weight being placed on my shoulders. When she finally lifted her gaze, I realized she was angry, not mildly displeased, not irritated, angry. "Commander Tanner," she rumbled, "why did you use a ceremonial blade to cut a cadet's uniform during a routine inspection?" I responded confidently, too confidently. It was a composure drill, Superintendent. A harmless test of her reaction under sudden equipment failure. Harmless. She repeated the word like it tasted foul. Then she asked a question that cracked my confidence. "Have you ever, at any point in your 22 cycles here, performed a similar exercise involving a bladed weapon?" I hesitated. A mistake she noticed instantly. "No, Superintendent." "And have you ever intentionally destroyed Academy-issued property while calling it training?" Well, technically the uniform belongs to Cadet." "Commander?" Her voice dropped like a collapsing star. "Stop dodging. Answer the question." "No." Her silence was worse than any shouted reprimand. Then came the blow that finally made my stomach twist. Cadet Torres has requested a full tribunal. A tribunal wasn't just an investigation. It was a formal trial. 3 judges, documented evidence, witness testimonies, legal observers. A stain that could follow an officer for the rest of their career. "Superintendent, that's unnecessary." "By regulation, she is entitled to one," Corell interrupted. "And based on preliminary review, her complaint has merit." Merit. The word hit me harder than a plasma burst. I left her office unsettled, but still in denial. I told myself this was all overblown. Humans were dramatic creatures. Maybe she misunderstood. Maybe the diplomatic corps pressured her. Maybe I was running out of excuses even as I generated them. Then things got stranger. Within days, humans started appearing across the academy. Not cadets, but actual diplomats and legal observers with shiny credentials and cold expressions. They toured the facility, interviewed staff, and requested access logs. Everyone whispered when they passed. Instructors who normally joked with me avoided eye contact. My closest colleagues suddenly didn't have time for lunch. Even Jorvin, a friend of nearly a decade, looked at me with something approaching pity before finally pulling me aside. "Vrek," he said quietly, "did you even read her full file?" I skimmed it. He exhaled slowly, as if bracing himself. "She's not just any human. Her parents are high-ranking Earth military intelligence. She's trained in combat diplomacy and legal strategy. She's been studying regulations since childhood." I stared at him, stunned. "What does that matter?" "It matters because you didn't prank a cadet," he said bluntly. "You pranked someone raised to treat protocol as a battlefield." That was the first moment I felt something colder than fear, not of the human, but of what I had set in motion, and how completely I had underestimated her. The real damage came next. Security footage, witness statements, archive complaints I had long forgotten, all resurfacing, all pointing in one direction, mine. And once the humans began compiling it into a coherent case, I realized something horrifying. Elena Torres was retaliating. She was operating strategically, methodically, professionally, using the regulations I'd ignored for decades. The tribunal was still weeks away, but I already felt the ground shifting under my feet. And deep down, I knew I was in very, very serious trouble. The investigation moved faster than I ever imagined. One moment, I was a respected instructor, convinced this would all blow over, and the next I was drowning in documentation. My own history turned into ammunition. Security footage surfaced first. The academy recorded every inspection from multiple angles for training analysis. Normally, this helped instructors prove cadets' exaggerated complaints. But this time, the footage did the opposite. It showed me clearly, deliberately unsheathing a weapon, stepping into Torres's personal space and slicing through her uniform while smiling. Not exactly a heroic portrait. Within days, witness statements followed. 14 cadets submitted reports, each eerily similar. They described the incident as unprovoked, disturbing, and destabilizing to morale. One pibbling claimed she couldn't sleep afterward, convinced an instructor might cut her next. Then came the part that truly shook me. Old complaints I had forgotten, cases dismissed, withdrawn, or quietly buried over the years, were reopened. A nervous pibbling who once said my surprise drills caused panic attacks. A Crite recruit who suffered an allergic reaction when I swapped meals as a joke. A Sovon cadet who sprained a limb during a fake emergency drill. Incidents I had shrugged off as part of training were now categorized under words like misconduct, recklessness, and endangerment. And every report, every data point, every inconsistency was traced back to one person. Cadet Elena Torres, the small, silent human who observed, documented, and assembled every piece with forensic precision. The more evidence surfaced, the more the academy shifted around me. Conversations stopped when I entered rooms. Instructors whispered. People stepped out of my path. It was as if my career had already ended. They were just waiting for the tribunal to make it official. The worst moment came when Superintendent Correll sent me a short, cold message. Review the list of regulations cited in the complaint. All appear valid. All 17. Every one. That night, sitting alone in my quarters, I did exactly what she suggested. And with each regulation I read, a pit opened deeper in my stomach. Regulation 472. Unauthorized use of bladed objects. Regulation 301. Destruction of cadet-issued materials. Regulation 115. Failure to maintain safe training conditions. Regulation 622b. Psychological endangerment during instruction. Each violation was written plainly, with no loopholes to squeeze through. And the terrifying truth was this. She was right. Absolutely, undeniably right. The next morning, I attended a meeting with my former colleague Bevix, someone I had expected to support me. Instead, he avoided eye contact and spoke as if reading from a prepared statement. I can't be involved in your defense, Vrek. I'm sorry. The academy is under scrutiny. The humans brought diplomatic observers. Everyone's being careful. Careful, a polite word for terrified. The human delegation was everywhere now, moving through halls with their icy professionalism, observing lessons, reviewing logs, making quiet notes. They didn't glare at me or confront me. They didn't need to. Their presence alone made a clear point. This wasn't a cadet filing a complaint. This had become an international incident. By day 10, rumors spread like wildfire. Some said I intentionally threatened Torres. Others claimed I swung the blade inches from her throat. The reality didn't matter anymore. Perception had already turned me into a villain. On day 12, I received a message marked urgent. Piari Tribunal preparation. Attached was a copy of Cadet Torres' official testimony draft. Thorough, clinical, devastating. She cited law, precedent, and interspecies treaties. She referenced human cultural values regarding weapon use. She even included a small diagram illustrating the proximity of the blade to her shoulder. She didn't embellish, didn't dramatize, just facts, cold, irrefutable facts. And reading them, I understood something important. Elena Torres wasn't trying to ruin me. She was simply doing what she'd been trained to do her entire life. Recognize danger, document it, and respond properly through channels. By the time the tribunal date arrived, the outcome felt inevitable. I stood not as an instructor defending his honor, but as a man slowly realizing his entire career had been built on fragile foundations. Foundations a single human cadet had shattered with nothing more than patience, precision, and paperwork. The tribunal chamber looked nothing like the training halls I once commanded with absolute confidence. Instead of cadets standing at attention, there were judges, recorders, and rows of silent observers. Every seat felt like an accusation. Every whisper carried a weight I could feel in my bones. I wore my dress uniform, polished, flawless, heavy with medals that suddenly felt meaningless. Across the room, Cadet Elena Torres sat between two human diplomats. She wasn't armed, didn't look angry, didn't even look triumphant. She simply looked prepared. That was somehow worse. Superintendent Corell opened the session with her gravel-like voice echoing through the hall. This tribunal will review the formal charges filed by Cadet Torres against Commander Tanner. Testimony, evidence, and applicable regulations will determine the final outcome. Torres stood when called. She didn't falter or fidget. Her presence felt oddly commanding for someone her size. She began with calm clarity. On the 23rd day of the 7th cycle, during a standard inspection, Commander Tanner drew his ceremonial blade without warning and cut my uniform at close proximity. I present visual proof. Security footage appeared on the holo display. There I was, circling her like a predator, withdrawing my blade and slicing through her sleeve with a smirk. Watching it objectively felt like being punched in the chest. I looked arrogant, reckless, dangerous. Not an instructor, just a bully with authority. The footage continued, showing the cadets' visible discomfort, their jump reactions, their silence. Then Torres presented the witness statements. 14 cadets. 14 consistent descriptions. But what made the chamber shift was what she said next. This incident was not an isolated event. Commander Tanner has a long history of unregulated psychological and physical stress drills with questionable safety. The holo display flooded with timestamps, old complaints, archive records, minor injuries, allergic reactions, incidents I had shrugged off for years. When laid out in a timeline, they formed a damning pattern that even I couldn't deny. Magistrate Kern leaned forward, voice sharp. Commander Tanner, do you contest the accuracy of these reports? I wanted to defend myself, but every excuse tasted bitter before I spoke. Some of those events were meant to build discipline. Many complaints were withdrawn. That does not negate the fact that they occurred, Kern responded. Torres continued with calm precision. I stood still during the inspection not because I was unaffected, but because reacting physically could have escalated the danger. I followed proper protocol. And afterward, when no apology or corrective action was offered, I filed through official channels. Her professionalism made me feel smaller than I had ever felt. Then she said the line that split the room's silence like a blade. In the environment Commander Tanner created, speaking up was treated as weakness. Regulation exists to protect cadets from exactly this imbalance of power. I had no response, no justification strong enough to counter the truth she spoke. Once her testimony concluded, the judges questioned me. Their tone wasn't cruel, just disappointed. That hurt more. They asked why I thought cutting a uniform with a weapon was acceptable, why I never filed safety reports, why I dismissed cadet concerns, why I believe experience exempted me from protocol. My answers sounded flimsy even to my own ears. Tradition, style, harmlessness, discipline, none of it held up under scrutiny. After hours of testimony, evidence, and questioning, the tribunal recessed to deliberate. I sat alone at my table, staring at my hands. For the first time in decades, they trembled. I had always believed my methods were justified. Tough, yes, but effective. But now, seeing everything laid out without my ego's filter, I couldn't escape the truth. I hadn't been building character. I had been abusing authority. Not intentionally, but carelessness is its own kind of harm. When the judges returned, Superintendent Corell read the verdict. Commander Tanner, this tribunal finds you guilty of multiple violations of Academy conduct, safety protocols, and appropriate treatment of cadets. You are hereby removed from your position as senior drill instructor and demoted to lieutenant. A low ripple spread to the audience. Shock, satisfaction, pity. I couldn't tell which was worse. Effective immediately, she continued. You are reassigned Supply Station X14. A full record of this ruling will be added to your permanent file. It felt like a sentence, which, in a way, it was. Torres didn't smile, didn't celebrate. She stood only long enough to acknowledge the panel, then sat quietly, professional to the end. And that was it. 22 cycles of service undone by a single moment of arrogance and a cadet who understood the system better than I ever had. My demotion became official the very next morning. One moment I was Commander Vrek Tanner, decorated instructor, respected mentor, name whispered with a blend of awe and dread, and the next I was Lieutenant Tanner, assigned to a remote supply station the galaxy only remembered when something broke. Exxon 4, a lonely metal outpost orbiting a gas giant no one bothered to map properly. I'd heard jokes about it for years. Where careers go to rust, they said. I never imagined my name would be listed among the forgotten officers stationed there. My new office was a repurposed storage closet. Literally, they cleared out a stack of old crate labels and dusted off a desk that wobbled when I breathed on it. Instead of overseeing battle simulations, I now counted inventory, food rations, repair tools, outdated tech modules. My tasks involved spreadsheets, requisition forms, and the occasional maintenance requests from board personnel. It was quiet, too quiet, and in that silence, reflection became unavoidable. At first, I told myself I'd been treated unfairly, that humans were overly sensitive, that Torres had overreacted, that the tribunal was political theater. But after a month alone with nothing but crates and regrets, the truth became impossible to deny. I had failed, not just in that single moment with the blade, but across cycles of dismissing concerns, trivializing safety and assuming superiority. My reputation had shielded me for so long that I'd stopped questioning whether my methods still served their purpose, or just my ego. Torres had seen what I refused to see. I'd become the kind of instructor cadets feared for the wrong reasons. 2 months into my assignment, a datapad notification arrived. Academy News, graduation report. I opened it out of habit and froze. There she was, Cadet Elena Torres, top of her class, highest tactical scores, outstanding leadership evaluations, commended for professionalism and adherence to protocol. And Corel herself had presented her with the Excellence Award. The accompanying image struck me harder than any tribunal verdict. Torres stood in her dress uniform, medals shining, posture perfect, and she smiled. A bright, genuine smile that I had never witnessed during her entire time under my command. She looked proud, accomplished, unburdened, and for the first time, I felt something unexpected. Respect, not fear of her abilities, not resentment for my downfall. Real, genuine respect. Because everything she did without breaking rules, without anger, without vindictiveness. She simply followed the system, used the tools available, held me accountable in the one way I'd never prepared for. Humans weren't terrifying because they were strong. They were terrifying because they were strategic. A Bellan warrior would have punched me. A Salvon tactician would have debated me. A Pibbling would have cried and run away. But humans think. They endure. They observe. They wait. And then they move with the precision of a scalpel. Torres could have yelled, retaliated, or fought back physically. But instead, she watched silently, cataloged everything, and dismantled my entire career using documentation and discipline, traits I once believed she lacked. 3 months into my exile, I heard through unofficial channels that she joined the Earth Diplomatic Corps. Special assignment, policy development, cross-species cooperation. Of course she had. She was born for it. Logic, patience, strategy. Where others saw chaos, she saw pathways. Where I created disorder, she restored structure. XWN 4 continued its slow, uneventful rotation around the gas giant, and I continued processing inventory, one crate at a time. Maybe someday I'll earn a chance at transfer. Maybe not. The tribunal's mark on my record is permanent. But if I ever return to the academy, unlikely as that may be, I know exactly what I'd say to new cadets. Never underestimate someone just because they're quiet. Never assume harmlessness from appearance. And never, ever ignore someone who knows the rule book better than you do. Because if you do, they won't punch you. They won't shout. They won't fight. They'll file the proper paperwork. And that, as I learned the hard way, is the deadliest strategy of all.